how you set it up.
So like, have like
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Rutherford Board of Education for October the 7th, 2019. I'd like to start by asking you all to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Here.
Dr. Oladi?
here.
Mr. Healy?
Here.
Mrs. Jones?
Present.
Mrs. Librera?
Here.
Mr. Mazzone?
Here.
Dr. Racine?
Here.
Mr. Rowland?
Here.
Mr. McLean? You have a quorum.
Thank you. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Act was enacted to ensure the rights of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meeting of public bodies at which any business affecting their interests is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the Rutherford Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place posted on the bulletin board outside the Borough Clerk's office and mailed to the Herald, South Bergenite, and Record newspapers and filed with the Borough Clerk. Hard copies of the agenda are available in the meeting room, and the agenda was posted electronically the Friday before the meeting date on our district's website at www.rutherfordschools.org. Taping and broadcasting of this meeting, regular minutes of the Rutherford Board of Education will be broadcast without editing during a 2-hour segment as limited by Comcast time constraints on Tuesday evenings at 8 p.m. on the Comcast Public Access Channel and FiOS Channel 38. A video of the meeting can also be viewed on our website at www.rutherfordschools.org. The video link can be found by opening the Board of Education link and clicking on Public Meetings and then Videos. Any member of the public who wishes to view a DVD of the meeting can make that request in writing to the board secretary. So I'd like to start by this evening by approving the minutes of the regular meeting of the Board of Education from September 16th, 2019. Any comments? Okay, can we put these in the record, please? Okay, I believe we have a special presentation here this evening tonight from the Rutherford Education Foundation.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, certainly.
First of all, I'd like to thank and acknowledge the Rutherford Education Foundation, who for many, many years now has supplied grants to teachers and administrators who submit grant applications for programs to supplement the budget that the board provides to our schools. And there have been so many outstanding programs that have been either created or maintained or aided by the REF's contributions. I'd like to acknowledge the REF president, Christina Cole, who is here with us, and thank her, and also thank Ms. Teresa Casadante. Mrs. Casadante, for the last several years, has contributed money, funds to the REF in honor and memory of her husband, Tom, former board president. And this year, the family continued to fund some of the projects. So thank you, Mrs. Casadante and the members of the Casadante family. This year, the REF funded 28 grants totaling $64,378.72. That's, again, a lot of money, and I thank the the REF for that, but I also want to thank the community who supports the various fundraising activities that the REF runs throughout the year. Without the community support and some corporate support, that money would not be raised. Included in that number of 28 grants and $64,378 are 5 grants funded by the Casananti family this year, totaling $5,308.85. So again, thanks to everyone. And finally, I want to thank the teachers and the administrators and staff members who put in grants, because it shows the initiative and it shows the insight into the needs of their programs and how they can increase the opportunities for our students here. And as you'll hear in a moment, the grants cover many, many different types of programs and also span a lot of grade levels. Grants that involve high school students who work with elementary school students, grants that go across sometimes buildings in terms of enhancing our programs. So I'm going to ask Ms. Cole and Ms. Casananti, if they will, to come up and help our president, acting president, Mr. Maison, to distribute the certificates as I acknowledge the grants and the recipients of the grant. If someone is not here tonight, we'll just hold on to the grant and get it to the school tomorrow, unless if you planned. I know sometimes there's a plan in place, you know, I'm picking up the grant for somebody, so if you do that, it's like the Academy Awards does that sometimes too. Our first grant from these initial grants are all funded by the Casananti and chosen by the Casananti family, working with the REF. And the first grant goes across grades K through 6. It's called Music First Junior Program, which allows students to use online experiences to learn music theory, write music, and enhance their music. That was a $1,000 grant, Connie DeFazio and Kristen Briggs Boyer. So if any. Another grant funded by the Casananti family is one that's been renewed several years. It is a combined grant for the students from Public Speaking Elective and also the Future Teachers of America Club. The grant gives $500 to fund Read Across America programs that the high school students do in our elementary schools, and that's Michael Stracco and Margaret Nastasi. A grant for helping our environment, which funded in Union School to help reduce carbon footprint. It funded water bottle refill stations near the cafeteria that will encourage students to really do 2 things that are worthwhile, and faculty. One is to drink more water for a healthier lifestyle, and also to use less plastic in terms of the refill. And that was $1,966, and that's Colleen Fensick from Union School. Another grant funded by the Casananti family, also involving the environment, the Growing Class Garden for a STEM program at the high school in the resource room for students to work with soil, plants, and plant growth, and that was $500 to Helene Wetzel. And at Union School, the last grant chosen and funded by the Casananti family is for flexible seating whiteboard desks to be used in our math programs, predominantly in Union School. And this was a grant of $1,334.85 to get those desks that allow different types of seating, and the students can actually write on the desk with their whiteboards on the desk. And that was Ava Cacaro and Seasoned Lions. And again, we're going to ask Mrs. Casananti to stay up there and keep helping because Christina could use the help. But we want to thank you once again for those grants that you and your family funded. So thank you. $200 grant was awarded to the high school creative writing students who published children's books through kits that help them become published authors, and that grant went to Melissa Dugard at the high school. At Union School, for our 7th and 8th grade French students to improve fluency through independent reading of popular children's books written in French, a grant of $185 to Nadia Alvarado. And the title of that program was Immersion Through Literacy in the French Classroom. Similar theme, also in Union School, reading in Spanish is discovering a new world. That builds a classroom library, again, for popular reading for our Spanish classes or Spanish students, students taking Spanish, $1,000 grant to Asante Smith. Accepted by Nadia Alvarado. This is a large group. This is like when you see the Emmy Awards and there's a TV show and about 100 people come up to get the, but the fourth grade teachers at Pierpont got together for a grant in Reflex Math and Fluency, an interactive program to fund an online math program that will allow teachers to set up classes and differentiate skill levels for students to review and master math facts using technology and games. And that sort of program you're going to hear about later when I talk about some of the things we do in response to test scores that come in terms of student achievement. So that grant was for $3,295, and the fourth grade teachers are Tara Ingalls, Bersu Demerblocki, Joan Macri, Dave Padilla, Matt Vaccaro, were all part of that grant. So I don't know if any of them are here, but if you are, come on up. And if not, Mr. Fazio will accept on their behalf. At Pierpont School also, the Mosa Mac Science Grant. This program is an online-based STEM program that encourages students to solve video mysteries through inquiry and science reasoning and leads them to some engineering techniques and knowledge. That was a grant of $550 to Naomi Heff. And Mr. Fazio. Yeah, no, the check is not there, right? I mean, she's not getting all the money, is she? All right? Because all of a sudden the music program is going to be very different. Right? At a program that was is going to work with our K-3 students called We Both Read. It's a book series that encourages parents to read with children. Each book is formatted for a parent and child turns reading alternate pages. Our supervisor of language arts authored the grant for $1,435.20, and that is Brian Ursulisi, We Both Read grant. At Pierpont School, a grant entitled TREPS, and I believe the S is written like a dollar sign. It's a business entrepreneur financial literacy program aimed to elementary school students that encourages students to learn the economics behind starting a business, and then they develop their own building concept and program and model and develop an action plan to start the business. And that grant was for $1,543.35, and that was for Jovan Evdomovsky at Pierpont School. And it looks like once again, I hope you have your phone, you're getting all these steps in because you're getting 10,000, right? At the high school, this grant has been funded partially by the REF for many, many years. And it's a program called Heroes and Cool Kids, which has our high school students work with as mentors our middle school and elementary school students. And the REF funded $2,500, and it was Nick DeBarry who authored that grant for Heroes and Cool Kids. And we'll keep Mr. DeBarry up here for a moment because he also put in a grant for $1,250 for Speak Sobriety, which was an assembly program for the entire student body to be informed and educated about substance abuse, prevention, and recovery. And I also want to thank the Municipal Alliance who split the cost of this grant with the REF. So that was for Speak Sobriety to Mr. DeBarry for the high school. And I believe that that assembly took place last week, right? Yeah, right. So, you know, these are things that are happening right from day one in our buildings. At Pierpont School, get ready, Connie, okay? The green team put in a grant for similar to what we had at the high school, for students to learn to grow and maintain individual plants, to learn about environmental variables on the life cycle of vegetation. And it was a $150 grant for the green team, and that was put in by Sean Bach. So it looks like Mr. Fenner. At the high school, Women in STEM grant, funding that allows our high school girls to attend workshops at the Liberty Science Center in Jersey City on STEM, and then come back and turnkey that information to our middle school students. So it also has the benefit of the older students working with the younger students, and that grant for $2,000 was awarded to Margaret and Stacy and Stephanie Curtis. I may have mentioned this elective one time here when we were talking about STEM, a grant for Ferris Wheel Connects, I guess. It's spelled fancy, I guess. Is that Connects, Chris? Is that okay? It's spelled K''NEX. It's like a album of a rap artist or something. But Ferris Wheel Connects, and this is part of our elective amusement parks and bridges, and this is a 6-foot Ferris wheel that students can learn how to put together and construct and augment, and it's $535 grant to Chris Viola for the STEM program at Union School. At Pierpont School, a grant for bringing coding to life with Dash, and this I found to be a very interesting program where students are taught coding. First of all, the idea of students in grades 4 through 6 learning coding is something that baffles a lot of us, I think, to see how far our programs have come and our kids have come. But they're also learning it through robots, and they're going to program and bring real robots to life, and then they're going to code the robots. And that's a grant for $3,549.70 for Danielle Sabato at Pierpont School. At Washington School, our preschool teachers and teacher assistants got together to put in a grant for die-cut machines, which help to aid preparing lessons, and with certain cutouts to help the younger students with learning, and bulletin boards, and make learning more fun for them as they go through the process. This machine is $2,477 and was funded by the REF, and that was Morgan Deming, Mamata Prabhu, and Patricia Urdas. At Washington School, a grant put forward called Peace Place, tools and that help students, especially students who may be suffering from some sensory disorders or anxiety issues, to find both the implements like those fidgets and tinkets, I guess they're called, cushions, ball chairs, earmuffs, sensory pads, all sorts of things, and a place to store and use them in. And this grant for $1,016.34 was Sarah Kuprick and Lynn McShane from Washington School. The sensory pathway is also at Washington School. And once again, Lynn, you might as well come on back up. Lynn McShane. And these are for children with autism who need brain breaks during physical movement. And these are sensory pathways with decals on the floor that helps create a pattern of sensory movements that help the student. So this sensory pathway, $199.71 at Washington School. Lynn McShane. Something that Mrs. Jones has been talking about for years and years and years, yoga and mindfulness through Core Yoga at Pierpont School, a continuation of a yoga and mindfulness program that started a year or two ago, a grant for $1,800 to Brianne Mahoney for yoga, mindfulness through Core Yoga. So Brianne's not here, so once again. And a club that sort of took off with a life of its own at the high school, yoga club, which promotes student wellness, but needs some basics like yoga straps and mats and so on. And the grant for $320 will provide that for Holly Basillo and the yoga club at high school. The foods room at the high school needed a lot of work in terms of the various kitchens, the 5 kitchens. It was always something that was very difficult to deal with in the budget. And this year, the REF came up with $30,000 to redo the kitchens in our FOOMS room here in our Family Consumer Science upstairs at the high school. And that's a great, great help to that program, which draws well over 100 plus students every single year. And that grant was awarded to Robin Cafaro from the REF. At Union School, the makerspace that occupies the library needed some furniture, chairs, tables, things like that would really be more conducive to a makerspace as opposed to a library. And the funding of $1,210.40 from the REF to Sherry Hanner and Inco to enhance the current makerspace with seating and varied tables. So thank her for that. Also at Union School, some more flexible seating with standing desks and bowl chairs and things like that to help enhance students and help them in terms of focusing in class. And that went to Nicole Ely with $625 at Union School. And at Washington School, we also have a grant for musical chairs, flex seating. Again, trying to transform the traditional classrooms into more contemporary classrooms with whiteboard desks and tables and wobble seats and various kinds of non-traditional seating, which helps students, especially when they're in the same room for a good part of the day. And the REF provided $2,500 of funding towards that project, and that was Ann Hessel and Hala Podolasic. And I kept looking at Wendy saying, I must have missed something. So if you don't show up, see, that's the reason you have to show up. If you don't show up, you might not get the grant. Grow Your Mind at Washington School challenges kids to expand their brain through online coding. I talked about coding before at Pierpont. Well, here it is in grade 2, and this activity helps promote critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, and also technology skills. A grant of $735.51 to Wendy Rossiter at Washington School. Well, as you can see, unless a great variety of skills, of programs, elective programs, core programs that really are either greatly enhanced by the REF or are created through the REF. Without them, it wouldn't even have happened. So again, on behalf of the board, on behalf of the faculty, the staff, and students, I really do thank the Casananti family and the Rutherford Education Foundation for not only what they've done this year, but years and years and years of support, and we look forward to continue working together. And again, I thank the teachers and the staff members who take the time and the energy to do some research, find programs that really will help grab kids into the academic and also the culture of the school. So we appreciate that. Mr. Maison, if we could, they would like to take a short break so we can get a group picture in the back, and then we can move on. So can we do that? Okay. Thank you, everybody. And we'll take a 2-minute break and then get back to the meeting.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, on behalf of the board, I would like to thank the REF for all their support, continued grants and projects that are supported. Without their efforts and without their support on these projects, they may never happen, so it's greatly appreciated on behalf of the board. I think now we'll turn to the report of our student representative, Ms. Boylan.
Good evening, everyone. Since our last meeting, a lot has been going on at the high school. Every grade, including the freshmen, have completely adjusted back into their groove of school. Almost every club has begun, and students from all grades and groups are becoming involved in the school. Many clubs have weekly meetings for all students, either during school or after school. In addition, many other extracurriculars have been doing great things for the school and the town. Volleyball, boys and girls soccer, tennis, and cross-country teams have had great success in the past month, and the soccer teams honored their seniors this past week. Moreover, the marching band hosted a competition this weekend and have been doing really well for the school. The National Honor Society hosted tours of Rutherford High School for high school reunions this past weekend and will be doing another one this coming weekend. They're also providing free tutoring for all high school students before and after school every day of the week. The Heroes and Cool Kids Club began a program they started last year in which students in the club spend their lunch period with the students in the MD, the Multiple Disabilities Classroom, twice a week. This program continues throughout the year and allows students to get to know other students they wouldn't normally interact and share classes with. This weekend, the Green Club volunteered at a repair cafe where people from town brought in old and broken goods and found ways to make something new out of it. The club is also working on the courtyard in the middle of the school to make it nice and relaxing and a good place for students to go. Last week, the high school had a special guest speaker that gave a speech to the freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors about his experience as a drug abuser. Stephen Hill got addicted to drugs in high school, and he explained his experience as an addict and his experience in rehab. He took a different approach to dissuading teenagers from drinking and doing drugs. He explained how it destroyed his life, not just showing a picture of decaying lungs from a smoker or the liver of an alcoholic. It had a much larger impact on the student body, and students were given the opportunity to ask him personal questions afterward. Rutherford High School has been running smoothly, and all students are completely back into the school routine. Classes are going well for all grades and all subjects, and many students are working hard to achieve good grades. Sophomores and juniors have registered for the pre-ACT and the PSAT respectively, and will be taking them in the next few weeks. Seniors are working on their college applications or whatever they plan to do after high school with their guidance counselors and are eager to know what their future has in store. Thank you so much for your attention, for listening to me. I hope you all have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your report. Are there any questions for our student representative?
Just a comment that the assembly that Bridget referred to was the one from the REF that we talked about, which... Yes.
If there are no other comments or questions for our student representative, then if you'd like, you may leave, so go home and complete your homework and other meaningful assignments. Get done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Good night.
You too. Moving on to the report of the superintendent.
Thank you. I'm going to keep my report very brief because I have to report on the student achievement as well as the, we used to call the violence and vandalism, now is the student safety data system report. But I do want to obviously thank the community, which I've done in a couple of different ways, but thank the community and thank the board for work over the past several years with the referendum and obviously with the successful passing of the referendum. We have begun preliminary work on the referendum to give you an update. There's not a tremendous amount of information to give you, but we had a meeting, Mr. Kelly and I met last week with 3 members of our architectural firm, PSA, Rachel Tiedemann, Kellen Chapin, and John Carton, and also Bill Morris from Epic. And we reviewed the next steps. PSA has already been in district this week, and will be in next week doing survey work in each of the buildings where work is being done. They'll be in sometime shortly after that to do some geotechnical work at Pierpont, the Kindergarten Center. You probably remember that we already did some work at Union and the high school. That's digging for to see in terms of core what we're building on, what we're building on, and all this survey work and the borings that are going to take place are done to come up with the detailed plans that then will be approved by the state, approved by the local officials for code, and then go out for bid. timelines are way too tentative right now to really project. However, the one really firm timeline is that we are planning to be operational in every building in terms of work beginning in June of this summer coming, 2020. So barring some kind of obstacle that gets thrown our way in the bid process or in any other process, we should be able to metaphorically in some cases, but realistically in cases, have the shovel hit the ground in June of 2020. In terms of the bond council, we met today. Mr. Kelly and I met with Lisa Gorab, who's our bond counsel and has been for many, many years, going back to the 2002 referendum. Our financial advisor, Anthony Universo from Lincoln Financial, and also our auditor, who you see every year, Bob Marone, and we met to review going out, to purchase those bonds. So right now, at the next board meeting, and please, Mr. Kelly, if there's anything that I either say out of order or incorrectly, please jump in. At the next board meeting, the board will be asked to approve a resolution authorizing the sale of bonds, going out to get the bonds going. Essentially, it'll be a long legalese resolution, but that's what we're doing, authorizing, getting those bonds. The date that we're looking to have the bid on the bonds, the sale of the bonds, is December the 4th, okay? And then it's a bid process where the lowest interest rate wins. And at that point, we're ready to go in terms of the bonds. So that's where we're at with that. Once again, we went through projected timelines of getting things done to get to that December date. I want to mention that rates are lower than we anticipated when we put the information out. And right now, all three individuals met with today are saying it looks pretty good for the next couple of months of having rates slightly lower than what we projected. So that's good news. The other thing, when we talked about getting this going and having the vote in September, we will have our first, payment on interest next year in the 2020 year. And if we didn't have the bonds procured before the end of this calendar year, the state reimbursement would not kick in until 2021. So that's another reason why getting out in front, without getting this done when we got it done, we'd be hard pressed for work this summer, but also we would not get that reimbursement that comes in annually, okay? And I know there's people who wonder about, are we really getting the money from the state? It's an annual payment that will come to us, and there's an actual, payment chart, like you would see it, like of a better word, payment schedule, amortization, I don't know what the term is, but it's laid out there for the next 20, 25 years. So we're in a pretty good place. Where, the work is just beginning. There's going to be a lot to do, but our professionals that we are working with on both the financial side and the construction side are at it and moving ahead at full speed. And that's where we're at. So there probably won't be a lot more to update until we get into November, I would think, early December. So that's probably when we'd meet with the committee, because right now what I told you is pretty much what it is. Okay? So before I move on, is there any questions or comments? And again, I thank you all for, I say 3 years. Gina corrected me and said 4, but you go back about 6 years sitting in the library one summer when we first started having this conversation. So it's been, 6 years, it feels like 30 or 40, right? Okay, moving on to the report on student achievement. It's a mammoth amount of paper. This is the template that the state gives us and tells us that we have to complete. Some of it has value, some of it not so much. So I'm going to try to walk you through the part. So if you have your booklet, and by the way, for anybody who's in the audience, okay, or anybody who's watching on the computer or on TV, once I present this report tonight, it will be up in the next couple of days on our website. So anybody who wants to see it can see it. Okay? So if you jump to pages 3 and 4, just a comment there. This is the state saying, well, we want to compare test scores in language arts and in math for 2017 through 2019. Keeping in mind in 2017 it was a different test. Okay, I mean it was PARC and now it's NJSLA. And keeping in mind also that what the state said about their test was you should not be comparing grade levels. You should be tracking the growth of students. So if you look at grade 3 and you say, oh, we went up or we went down, well, that's not what the test is about. It's a whole different group of students with different strengths or weaknesses or needs. So a more logical way maybe to look at this would be if you went vertically, like for example, if you took level 1, grade 3 in 2017, there were 7.1% who were at the lowest level of achievement. And then if those kids became 4th graders in 2018 is 1.6. So there's improvement there, right? And then when they became 5th graders, 2019 is 3.1, a little higher from the year before, but still much better than where they were in grade 3. And again, that's grade level, it's not students, so maybe there's an influx of bright kids or kids who struggle a bit, so those numbers, it wasn't supposed to be a grade level comparison in contrast, yet the first 2 pages, first probably 7 or 8 pages the state gives us is grade level comparisons, okay? But that said, you know, we see growth in most cases. If you go to page 4, I want to mention one thing I'll say now and I'll repeat again. Don't be misled by grade 8 math, because in some districts, 8th graders take grade 8 math. In our district, 8th graders take Algebra 1, except for students who struggle in math or who are special needs students. So our 8th grade math scores are always going to be a little bit off the mark. Same thing with Algebra 1. Algebra 1 scores at Union School are great because they are our majority of our students who have good math skills. The Algebra 1 kids in the high school are the kids who took grade 8 math in Union School. So they are the ones who struggle a bit more. So I just want to make that point about that, okay? Moving on to page 5 and 6. This one, I'll give you a very simple, it's a very similar thing comparing different years, but you see the pluses in the column. It says levels in district trend, and for levels 4 and 5. You want to see more pluses than minuses in that column, right? Because those are the kids who are achieving. So when you're comparing different years, 2017 to 2019, you want to see more pluses and fewer minuses. If you see where I'm looking at, 4th column over from the end, right, to the right, levels 4 and 5 district trend. So more pluses mean we're trending up, right? On the other end, with the levels 1 and 2 district trend, the first column, you want to see more minuses because we want those numbers to go down. But again, like I said, it's not the kind of statistical analysis that is that meaningful in terms of you're comparing PARC with NJSLA and you're comparing grade levels and not kids, okay? And that same thing happens with math, and they provide some information on the bottom about not all 8th graders take math and on the bottom here, but it's the same concept. You want more pluses on the other side. Okay? I want to say though, we did very well. We really did. It's hard to compare to other years because it's a different test, but we did very well. And in looking at the next pages, number of students who take the test, to me that's not an important factor to consider based on enrollment. Of course, when you look at opt-outs, you want to get more kids taking them, and that's why the state puts them in. Because remember, they penalize you if you have fewer than 5% more than 5% opt-outs. Okay, jumping to pages 9 and 10. These are our district scores for this past year. And I'd like you to look at the fact that we're going to talk about grade 3 in a moment, but we had, compared to the state, we had a tremendously large number in most cases of level 5 and level 4, and a smaller number, significantly smaller, in most cases on level 1 and level 2. So you can see that we had in grade 7, for example, language arts, 48% of the kids in level 5 compared to 29 in the state. And those numbers, with the exception of grade 3, which we'll talk about in a few moments, ring pretty consistently. I also want to point something out to you. If you take a look at the math page for a moment, where once again we do considerably better in most cases, but where we don't do better in some cases, right? Keep in mind that 4 and 5 is what's considered to be proficient or passing. So grade 5 in math, where we had 0.2% less level 5 than the state had, right? 10.8 compared to 11. If you look at page 10, I'm on page 10 now. If you add together level 4 and level 5, we're at 73.4% proficiency, and the state's at 46.8. And that's true in a lot. Grade 7, 65.6 compared to 42. So again, I caution you to look just at one particular level. You know, when you combine the proficiency levels, we're doing very, very well. And another thing to keep in mind, that with certain math courses, which I'll get to later on, level 3 is also considered proficient. So we're pleased with the number of students scoring 4 and 5, and we're pleased with the number of those categories where we've shown growth. Even though, again, the caveat is we're not looking at grade level growth, we're looking at student growth, okay? Grade 3 is the one place where we have 2 schools, that in Algebra 1. And you will notice on pages 11 and 12 that there's a little bit of a disparity in some of those scores. And we are addressing that. We're looking at that, okay? The one thing is Lincoln School initially piloted Writer's Workshop a full year before Washington did, and is now in their, I think, their 3rd year. Whereas Washington is in their first full year without the pilot. And we have continued our partnership at Washington with Teachers College from Columbia University in that program. The other thing that we addressed, and I think I mentioned it in my communication to you, is Math in Focus, which came in several years ago. We're doing a refresher on Professional Development Day for elementary teachers across the district in Math in Focus, again, to try to show some increase there, okay? So you have pages 11 and 12 are there. And then page 13 and 14, the same scores. Now you have them with the schools separately. A lot of redundancy here, okay? If we jump ahead to page 17, you'll see a similar comparison contrast with Union School and the high school in terms of Algebra 1. And like I mentioned to you, where you have 59% of the students at Union School in level 4 and 8 at level 5, but in the high school you have 20 and then 1%. Well, again, the reason is the students who take Algebra 1 in high school are the students who often with IEPs, with special needs, or who really struggle in math because they were the grade 8 math students. So, and you know, and that's just facts. That's not an excuse, it's facts. Okay. So those are the test scores. If you go to the charts that go on pages, let me go to page 20 first. Page 20, that's what I was talking about before. Geometry and Algebra 2, the graduation requirement is to be proficient in levels 3, 4, and 5. So where we did very well on, compared to the state, but you might say, well, compared to the state is very well, but still is only 33% of students who, passed geometry. Well, no, it's 75.9 because the state recognizes the challenge of those courses and goes back to level 3. Okay, and the same is true with Algebra 2. Okay, so we're at nearly 80% with Algebra 2. You then have charts that run from page 21 to page 30 about different subgroups. And it shows you race in terms of white, Asian, and Hispanic students. We don't have other races there because you have to have 20 in each class of any group to form a subgroup. You'll notice in some of the, well, I'll wait till I get to those charts. Then you have gender, how males do and how females do. And then there's a chart for students with disabilities. And all these charts are there for both math and language arts. So there's a lot of charts. And it shows you subgroups over 3 years in addition to this past year. I'll be honest with you, with this disabilities, if you see there's a year that doesn't have a group, that's because in particular grade level, grade 3 one year, for example, in 2018, there weren't 20 special ed students in grade 3, so they don't get reported as a subgroup. You have to have 20, okay? You know, it's a lot of work on the state's part, a lot of data for us to look at to tell us that certain students that have learning disabilities don't do as well as students who don't have learning disabilities, and students who don't speak English well don't do as well as some students. I mean, it's, again, you know, take it for what it's worth with the data. We then get to a section from pages 31 to 50 something or other, actually 62, of interventions. And this is work that our supervisors, Mr. Salisi, Ms. Schmedding, our teachers, and Ms. Fargo, who oversees curriculum, worked on in looking at the data. Where the real data comes in for this test is data I can't share with the public or even with the board because it's the individual student score reports, okay? And we look at that data and we find out what standards did we not score well at? And then what interventions can we do on every grade level to address those areas? Now, I know it looks like a lot of standards and a lot of interventions. I want to just point out to you that Algebra 2, there are 46 standards. Algebra 1, there's 47. The lowest number of standards in language arts, 7 with 19 standards. So at every grade level, there's as high as 53 standards where there's questions on a test. So when you see a couple of handfuls where we don't do that well, it's not really alarming. One of the interesting graphs we get from the state, and again, I'm going to just hold this up for you to see. This is a grade 10 language arts. So the blue that you see here, okay, because again, I can't share this. The blue here, that's where the state is. The green dots are where we scored on those questions. All these lines are questions aligned to standards. So you look at this chart and you say, oh, on this question, which dealt with standard 10, 3.1, we scored well above the state average. If you see one here that's below, that's where we're below, okay? And we have this for every test, and then attached to that is the question, what the question covered, and how many students answered that question. And that's an important statistic too, because if 3 students answered the question, we then look at the question to determine, well, did they not answer it because it was so challenging they couldn't even answer it, and we have to address that, or did they not answer it because maybe it was at the end of the test, they were running out of time, and we don't want to, and there's other questions that indicate that's not a problem, so maybe we're not going to consider that data to be valid, right? But this is where some really good information comes from. Here's another one like math from grade 4, and you can see how we're well above the state. But there's one question here where we're below, another one over here where we're below. So especially when you see a grade level performing so well, you take a look at those questions and that standard to see what is it that we could do maybe to improve that, okay? I was very pleased in looking at the work that was done by both, because they incorporate different online programs that we've purchased that we use, different classroom interventions, different interactions with teachers to support skills. Some of them just give advice. On page 34, it says, perhaps in our rush to analyze the text, we're skipping over simple summarization skills. This can be pushed with renewed focus. It's not pointing somebody to a website and saying, maybe when you do a lesson, let's review summary skills better. We might be rushing that a little bit. So this is a very good document that comes from the data for the test. And what I've been saying all along about this test, going back to Park, is that the test itself doesn't have the greatest value to me. I mean, I don't get too excited about we score high, we score low. It's one day, one point in time. But this sort of data does give us a lot of information to really attack curriculum and look at programs. And some of the programs that come before you for approval, different things like we just bought that Albert and things like that, those programs are researched based on what we find out with this test data. I was also pleased on page 34 to see, and again on I think it was page 36, that on grade 4 and grade 7, no student scored poorly on any of the questions. There was no intervention needed on those grade levels. So that's a nice thing as well. So that's it for the NJSL. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here, I know, but that's basically the heart of it. Now, to go through some of the other things in this booklet, on page 63, the science test that's given every year, which is always a tough one because, especially for the high school kids, they say it has no real meaning to their graduation or any other thing, but it's important to the district for data. We took the test last spring. We're not getting the scores back until at least the winter. So there's nothing to report there, okay? On page 64, the Access for L's is a test given to English language learners. We used to call them ESL. It used to be English as a second language. Now it's English language learners. The test has different areas of scoring. Entering, very basic, emerging, getting a little better, developing, expanding, bridging, and then reaching is the really high level. Reaching is something that many of us would probably aspire to be at, okay? It's very challenging. Of the 43 students who participated in our ESL classes last year, 28 or 65% exited the program. So that's a good thing. It shows that they're moving along in the program. And the results of the test are next page, which shows where they stand. You see the majority of kids are in the developing, expanding, or in the bridging. And those are the students who, among other factors, can exit the program if they're there. Page 66, dynamic learning maps is another assessment that we have to give. For any student, a special ed student, who's in a program that does not follow the traditional core curriculum, they have to be assessed through a dynamic learning map, which is a DLM. Of all of our special ed students, both in district or out of district, only 5 students in district and 13 out of district participated in DLM. That's an important fact. That shows you that what we're doing with our special ed kids in district and out is exposing them to the curriculum that the general ed kids are being exposed to. Because if they're not exposed to that curriculum, they have to sit for this test. So we are raising the bar for our special ed students. Because, the other thing to keep in mind, though, the good news on that is we're exposing the students. The other side of it is in-district students and out-of-district students are included in our test scores. So again, when you're looking at students who struggle, that's all included in those percentages as well, right? But with the DLM, because there's only 5 in-district, 13 out-of-district, the state doesn't allow us to report those scores because they feel when you get anything that low of a number, it's identifying who students may be, okay? The profile of the class of 2019, we had a graduation rate of 96.7. That's a cohort. Remember, I explained this many times. It's not the number of seniors who start on September of their senior year. It's the number of freshmen who began 4 years ago. So if kids leave school along the way, get held back a year because of non-credit for attendance or anything like that, they count in that cohort. So where we may have only had a handful of students, not a handful, maybe two fingers of students not graduating of the kids who start in September, there may be more, and that's why the percentage is 96.7. But again, when you figure out you have about 200 kids, 3%, 4%, is only 3 or 4 kids. Now, the year before, for those of you who like to compare and things like that, we were at 93.5. So this year the cohort was a little better. Very consistent with 95% attending some type of college, 4-year or 2-year, 1% going on from non-college. That's 95 to 97 has been the norm forever. 3 go into employment and 1 into the military. Okay? Our advanced placement scores continue to go very high. We have 86% of the students who took the test last year scoring 3 or higher, which is a remarkable number, which probably means we'll get that citation once again from the College Board. And again, our numbers continue to grow. We had 313 AP exams taken by 183 students. It used to be maybe 80, 90 students taking 150, 160 exams. So the program's really growing and flourishing. And kudos to the kids and the teachers and the administration. SATs, this year we had 88% of the class take the test. Our mean score was 1098. Last year it was slightly higher. I think it might have been 1102, 1103, but statistically that's pretty much the same. The SATs do not provide the detail they used to provide before with averages and state and national, all that. You have to really dig for that, and they release that later on. We're usually, and I'm sure we're going to be above the averages right now, but we've always plateaued around that number, which is not a bad number, but we always like it to be better if we could. The ACT, which is an alternative college placement, went up a little bit from a 23 average composite score in the past to 24. A very small number of students take that, 24 students, about 12% of the class. And some of those are students who also take the SATs. They do both. Okay? And then I also included for you the graduation requirements, just so you can see what part of the PARC or the New Jersey standards test applies to the graduation rate. Okay? So that's the report. The short précis of it is we did, I think, very well. There's areas we need to address, and I think you can see by the detailed response that came, because these scores only came out maybe about a month ago, and the work that's been done in the couple, we got them when they were embargoed, and the work that's been done that past month has been tremendous to address those standards. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions from any board member?
So what is the plan for this year in terms of testing? Will the students be taking the PARC test?
No, it's still the NJSLA. Same. Okay. It's been NJSLA for the last, this is the 2nd year. And there is no change. I know they're talking about change. I think we're going to be seeing this test for several years to come.
Test.
Yeah. Okay. What has changed is that the 11th grade now doesn't take the test anymore. The graduation requirement is achieved in either 9th or 10th grade.
Thanks.
Quick question about the cohorts that are counted. You said are the freshman through senior. If someone does repeat a grade, are they counted as part of a cohort?
No, it's counted the cohort he started with. So if a student gets held back for whatever reason, academic or attendance, right, or whatever reason, and doesn't graduate with his class, then that counts as a non-graduate in that cohort and doesn't count in the other cohort. You're part of one cohort when you come in. If a student leaves the district, then the school he goes to has to claim him in New Jersey SMART, which they do if he's in a New Jersey school. If he goes out of state, sometimes he counts against you. You can't verify where he is, and they don't claim him. Okay. And, keep in mind, when you get on CUSAC, which you don't have to worry about now for another 3 years, but you lose points if your graduation rate's not at a certain level. You lose points if your attendance rate is too high. They tell you that the way you're going to keep attendance rates lower is to enforce your attendance policy of withholding credit. But if you do that, it goes up. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's what I'm saying. Here's what I look at. I look in the mirror. I try not to look in the mirror much anymore, but I look in the mirror and I say, are we doing a good job? Are we producing kids that are going to good schools, are coming out as good people? And some of these external mandates coming out of Trenton sometimes make it very difficult to meet a standard that's artificially set by someone. But that said, we understand the rules of the game, right? So we're not going to beat people up about it, but we're going to say get to work like you saw with these interventions, and let's figure out how we're going to do better.
Mr. Hare, I'd just like to say congratulations on the AP results and growing that program. It's a difficult program probably to grow and get those results.
Yeah, it's been a real last several years. Of course, high school principal says ever since the change was made to the high school principalship. But over the last several years, we took a different approach and tried to open it up to more students, raise the bar. And, you used to think, well, that would lower the scores, but it hasn't. The kids have accepted the challenge. So, well, okay. I'd like to move on to, these reports tonight. The report, and I have another one a little bit later too that I'll get to, but the report of student safety data. If you recall, I have to report period 1 at one point in the year. I have to do period 2 at another point in the year. I have to do the annual. So you've seen some of these numbers before. So the students that have been suspended for the year for either violence, which means usually some kind of a fight or altercation, 10 for the year, 3 vandalism, 4 substance abuse, 1 weapon, and there were 18 HIB confirmed, which doesn't mean suspension. There were 16 HIB alleged, and 154 other incidents leading towards a suspension, either in school or out of school. You'll see the majority of those are at the high school. Those are usually things that are maybe not complying with a directive or excessive lates or failure to go to detention, things of that nature, not major things that get reported. These numbers are usually consistent from year to year with some variations. Some years a little bit higher than the others. But as I said, with 2,700, I've said many times, with 2,700 students for 187 days, a lot of these things, these are not alarming numbers. In fact, I think they're pretty good in terms of how things go. So I don't know if there's any questions about that. This is not something you have to approve. This, again, is just for your information. Later on, we're going to do the annual bullying HIB training that we have to self-assess. That you have to approve me sending those numbers off to Trenton, and I'll talk about that when the time comes.
So, Mr. Hurley, who does this data get reported to?
It goes into the state. There's a student safety data system. It's in their file. So it's there for whoever, I guess, it winds up with on the NJA report card in one way, shape, or form.
What's the difference between period 1 and 2? I know there was a reason for that.
No, period 1 is the first half of the school year, and period 2 is the second half of the year.
Right.
What's the reason why numbers escalate?
Numbers, yeah.
Well, because everybody's great in September into early October. By the time Halloween comes, all bets are off. I mean, no, you think about it. You have, everybody starts off the school year and new and fresh and optimistic, and and then they're with each other for 185 days, and you're not going to get suspended for being late once or twice. You might be suspended if you're late 30 times, right? You might not get annoyed at somebody where you say an inappropriate comment in September, but by November you had enough and something happens. So, discipline issues always rise as the year goes.
Thank you.
Any of the board members, any other comments about either report?
And one other quick comment. I know I said I was going to be brief, but the other thing, one of the things we talked about this year, right, was social and emotional learning, and we're working on that in the schools, right? We talked about growth mindset and mindfulness over the last couple of years. I gave kind of a serious, but at the same time somewhat facetious answer about kids are late 30 times and kids get annoyed. Kids who are suffering from issues that need help with social emotional learning, they have to hold it together every day, right? Comply with a lot of rules. And after a while, it gets hard sometimes to hold it together. So, things begin to evolve in the school year. I told Mr. DeBarry when he became the assistant principal and Ms. Saxon when she became the assistant principal, do not judge your job by the first 2 months. Okay? Because, the issue, same with guidance counselors. The problems mount as the pressures of the school year mount. So, okay.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving on To the report of the president, Kevin is not here this evening. He sends his regrets for not being able to be here. I do have just a couple brief comments I wanted to make on behalf of Kevin and myself, really focusing around the referendum. And I just made some quick notes. So on behalf of myself, Mr. McLean, obviously for the benefit of those who are watching at home, the rest of the Board of Education wanted to thank our superintendent, Mr. Hurley, our business administrator, Joe Kelly, our communications and marketing firm, our building administrators, members of the Rutherford Education Association, and last but not least, most of all the citizens of Rutherford, those who came out and supported, those who came out and voted. The community support for the referendum, the commitment to our schools is why the referendum was successfully passed, and we as a board are very thankful to everyone. Community members should know that with the passage of the referendum, we realize that the real work now begins. Our job is to work hand in hand with the administration to ensure that these projects are completed on time, on budget, meeting metrics, deliverables, and using the funding, obviously, as it was intended. During our meeting tonight, obviously, board members may have some other comments. We'll talk about any potential safeguards, but obviously the passage of the referendum is huge. I could feel the excitement the night that it passed on the 24th. It was palpable, and I think the same was true the next morning at all of our schools. So the Board of Education, along with the administration, we're committed to seeing these projects successfully completed while maintaining our public transparency. And once again, on behalf of the board, I just wanted to thank everyone, all of my fellow board members, again, the administration. Kudos, great job to Rutherford. So I know it's the president's remarks, but if any other board member has any comments, I think now may be appropriate.
Ditto.
All right, anybody else? Sally?
Yeah, when Mr. Hurley mentioned before the meeting that we had in the library, which was 5 or 6 years ago, I remember that very well. And I remember that we, at that point, I think probably about half of us who are here today were in that meeting. And it was a meeting where we took some time to think about what we needed for the district in the long term. And it's been a long road, and there's been a lot of work, and there's, I think, been a lot of challenges along the way. But I think where we've ended is something that we all can be proud of, and something that really truly represents the interests of the community, the interests and vision that we all have for the students and the programs in the district and the community. And so I'm very proud of what we've done as a team and what the community has risen to support.
Well said. We all should be. Anyone else? Okay. If not, moving on, I'd like to open the meeting up to the public for any comment. I think based on the crowd, we'll take anything on the agenda or anywhere else for that matter. Tape 40, anyone? Okay, not hearing anyone at 8:40. We'll close this and move on. New business. I'd like to move forward with personnel. Mrs. Ahmed.
Thank you. I'd like to move the motions tonight 1 through 18 as I will be presenting. David Padilla is to accept retirement of Mr. Padilla, math teacher at Pierpont School, with regret, effective March 1st, 2020. 2, Zainab Salih Karimi as a lunch monitor to approve. 3, Karen Skirbo to approve her as a lunch monitor. 4, Caitlin Goldberg. This is a little confusing to me. I'm not a finance major here, but I mean, it says cheerleading coach for Wolves, fall and winter season, $3,735 per season effective September 24th. Then it says the fall season will be prorated. It's to rescind her though.
She already worked since August 1st.
Oh, okay. That was a little...
When practice
here.
began, yeah.
All right, 5, salary level changes due to additional credits for Alexandra Demetrius and Matthew Vaccaro. 6, Alicia Skelsa, that's to approve her leave of disability and everything for child family leave. 7, Catherine Stresco, leave of absence under the Family Leave Act, and also number 8, the same thing as the Family Leave Act for Chris Ann Ronco. 9, Rutherford Community School Advisory Council. Approve the council for the 2019-20. Could you explain this to me, this,
We should do this at
Why
the
don't we,
end.
yeah, we'll go through all
Okay.
of them, and then we'll have time for question and
all right.
comments.
10, 11, and 12 are to approve. 10 was Erica Fata, approve her for tutoring. 11, Laura Paszowski for increase in hours as teacher assistant. And 12, Sandra Gonzalez, also for teacher assistant, increase in hours. 13, Union School co-curricular, to rescind approve the following assignments and stipends for the 2019-2020 school year as listed. 14, title instructors, to approve for teacher for supplementary after-school Title I programs for Gianna Sedler. 15, substitute teachers, another substitute teacher for school year effective, that's for $90, and Robin Coben. 16, travel reimbursements, and there's 10 teachers, nurses, and also, what was the other one? Somebody else. SAC, speech teacher, school nurses, as listed. 17 is Joyce Kenyon, to accept her resignation as a teacher assistant in Washington School. And 18, travel reimbursements, to approve the following travel reimbursement for Megan Newmuller. And that's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Mint, and I apologize, I just want to make sure we're following procedure.
That's okay.
I interrupted you. So, is there any board member with any questions or comments? Mr. Hurley, any comments on it?
Well, Mr. Med has a question.
Where were we now?
Number 9.
The
Number 9.
Community School Advisory Council. The Rutherford Adult School changed their name to the Rutherford Community School. That was, I think, approved, right? Did that, approved in July, maybe, to try to.
This is for the high school?
The
You mean
Rutherford
after-
Adult
night
School. Yeah, the adult school,
Oh.
yeah. So to to be more consistent with their program of community school, which is what many of them are doing now. So every year, by the bylaws, the Board of Education has to approve the members of their advisory council of board. So this is just a annual approval that we do, but the name has changed.
Yeah, that's straightened it out for me, thank you.
Do they appoint these members?
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay.
I would just, go ahead.
I just wanted to say thanks to Dave Padilla for his years. Yeah, he helped my son out for a while, and we've all seen him at all the REA events, right? And yeah, so I know at least one student is going to be sad that he's going to be gone. So, and there's going to be and many more.
Yeah. Well, I was going to mention Mr. Padilla, which he'll be here through the winter, obviously, but, we all got to know him a little better, right, as his role as REA president, so we wish him well.
Absolutely. Step back. So, Mrs. Med, would you like to get these motions forward?
So, with the board's permission, I'd like to move 1 through 18 under personnel.
Second.
So these are all. Any further questions? If not, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Dr. Alati?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Cabrera?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Moving on to curriculum instructions, Mrs. Jones?
Certainly. There are 3 resolutions for board member consideration under curriculum and instruction. Resolution 1, out-of-district placements. Resolution 2 is field trips, now totaling 44. And Resolution 3 is emergency bus evacuation drills for the year.
Mrs. Jones, there is a fourth. I didn't see all
sorry.
the updated materials.
Thank you.
Certainly.
There are 4 resolutions. I said corrected. Thank you. And Resolution 4 is the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones. Mr. Hurley, any comments?
Yeah, the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights, every year, you probably recall this, every year, the schools have to do a self-assessment of the training they provide to either students and/or staff in components of the HIB law. Usually it's around this time of year that I ask the board to approve the statement of assurance to be sent in. It has to be sent in by the end of October to the state. Then somewhere in the spring, they affirm that, and we have to approve the affirmation. We approve the same things twice. So as you can see, this is a self-assessment of how we are following the procedure, how we're following the regulations, how we're conducting investigations, training we do in the curriculum or to other staff and other programs we run. The high score can be a 78. This year, we graded out at a 72.8. Which is a little higher than we've done in the past, because quite frankly, I think we're doing more in terms of programs in the buildings. So what the board is being asked to do is just to affirm that I can send these off to Trenton for their review.
Okay, thank you. Any board member have any questions or comments?
I also apologize that this came in late, but the deadline is October 30th, and I didn't want to wait to the 28th, just in case something went awry.
Okay, if there's no questions or comments, Mrs. Jones, would you put these 4 motions forward?
I move resolutions 1 through 4.
Is there a second? Dr. Lottie? Any other comments? Call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Dr. Alati?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebrera?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes,
Motion's carried. Thank you.
thank you. Moving on to finance, Dr. Racine?
Yes. We have 7 motions today. The first is the approval of bills. Number 2 is the business administrator's merit goal. 3, 4, and 5 are non-public pass-throughs to 3, 4, 5, 6. Thank you. Are non-public pass-throughs to St. Mary's for security, textbooks, and the like. And number 7, labeled 10 in number 7 is to renew our photocopy lease agreement.
Yeah, that's
Great,
right.
thank you. Mr. Hurley, any comments on these?
No, I don't know if anybody has questions, either me or Mr. Kelly, about the funds for St. Mary's. We're the conduit for those funds. You want to say anything about the photocopier lease, Mr. Kelly? Other than saving us?
No, these, we lease a number of photocopiers throughout the district, typically on a 5-year lease. These 5 machines that are up, 6 machines that are up, we're actually getting a very good deal on them, and as it says in there, we'll be saving about $2,600 a month for those machines, so it's kind of an offer we couldn't refuse.
Are there any board members with any questions regarding any of the resolutions? Okay, not, Dr. Alati?
It's not a question, it's just more of a comment. I know one of the merit goals is in finance and the others in facilities. I just wanted to comment and thought they seemed very appropriate. And so, I definitely applaud you for the, quality and thoughtfulness of the goals related to work that's coming up to be done.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alati. So if there are no other comments or questions, Dr. Racine, put these resolutions forward.
I'd like to move 1 through 7.
Is there a second? Mr. Mueller? If there's no additional comments, please call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Dr. Alati?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebrera?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
Good, thank you. Moving on to policy, Mr. Healy?
Yes, there was a policy committee meeting on September 30th at 6:45 PM. And tonight, we have one motion with One motion to review and approve as a first reading 12 policies, of which one is new and 11 are revisions as listed in your packet tonight.
Mr. Hurley?
I hopefully you read, I know the policies are arduous to get through, but there's that blurb that describes the changes. And all of these policies have been driven by either changes in law or court cases that suggested that maybe certain wording should be in certain policies. So none of them are arbitrary, or none of them are really driven by any perceived need of in the district, but just to be their compliance policies, essentially. And as we talked about at the committee meeting, many of the policies, especially those in student transportation, there's a number of policies there on transportation, have come out of the events of the accident that occurred in Paramus a year or so ago, and those laws changed, and we've been following all those rules and regulations ahead of policy, because the law, trumps policy sometimes. So I don't know if there's any specific questions about any of them, but that's generally, these are all pretty much mandated changes.
The only comment I'll have is that I appreciate that Strauss Esme highlights the changes for us simply, so he's going through the updates. So.
Yeah, just, we haven't talked about them for a while, but it used to be that I would have to remember to log into school boards and search out any changes, whereas now anytime there are changes, they send it to us and guide us through them. So it's, that in and of itself keeps us very current, because I don't always remember things too well.
Again, any board member with any comments, questions? Dr. Alati?
Just one, in regards to the revised school district security policy, so I'm assuming that's in relation to Alyssa's law?
We're getting quotes.
We're getting quotes too?
Right.
Okay, that was my question.
Great. So if there's no additional questions, Mr. Healy, would you put the resolution forward, please?
Yes, I will put it forward as a first reading, and we do another review of this our next meeting in October. So yes, I'd like to bring it forward tonight.
Is there a second? Dr. Alati? Last chance for questions. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Dr. Alati?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Cabrera?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Buildings and grounds, Dr. Alati, can you help us with that this evening?
Yes, there are 3 motions that are put forward at the recommendation of the superintendent. The first is to accept with gratitude a donation of an M3 Hammond organ and bench circa 1950s to the Union School. The second is the second business administrator's merit goal. And then the third is to approve the shared services agreement between the Rutherford Board of Education and the Rutherford Borough from October 14, 2019 to October 13, 2024.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Hurley?
Yes, the shared service agreement, again, I apologize for bringing this to the table tonight, but October 14th is the date of expiration for our last 5-year agreement. We have been working on this periodically with the borough manager, and quite frankly, with all that's been going on, it just kind of moved along slowly. It's the exact same agreement we've had in place with the borough for the last 5 years, which essentially is they use our gyms for recreation, we use their fields for our athletic programs. We maintain the gyms, they maintain the fields. There's 2 changes I'm going to get to. We work with them in terms of various insurance certificates and things like that to use the gyms and fields. The transportation is that we work with them in the summer to provide busing for some of their camps and things like that. They allow us to use their fueling facilities for our vehicles, and we work with them in terms of garbage, solid waste, the recycling pickups. and the borough agrees to take care of our containers and all of that for collection. We use the office space at Borough Hall with no charge. We share and you help each other out with specialized equipment sometimes for maintenance or vehicles. Our construction plan review fees are waived. We'll come back to custodial hours in a minute. We offer busing for students who are in our programs, and especially the special ed students who then go to the summer camp. It's the same agreement we've had in place for the last 5 years, okay? The one thing that changed, the new addition, was item number 4. The borough agrees to restrict the use of Memorial Fieldhouse to Rutherford High School athletic teams. That was always in there. Now we've added that the board and borough will share the upkeep and maintenance of the facility. That facility that they put several $100,000 into is only utilized by our football and baseball teams. So we agree that they'll take care of the maintenance side of it, and we'll have one of our custodians keep it tidy and clean during the day, which I think is a good trade-off. The other thing that was changed, when we provide custodial coverage on the weekends for recreation, and custodians come in primarily, exclusively for rec programs. Several years ago, we did have a one-year deal that we got some overtime from the borough, but we do realize that all the money, comes out of the same pot. But the one concern we have is that sometimes we have a custodian in on Sunday or a late Saturday evening, and programs get canceled, and we don't get notified of that. So if that happens, the borough will agree to cover that cost if they should have given us a heads up that it was canceled. So custodial cost, right. So again, not wanting to be working in the parking lot on October 15th, I decided to bring this tonight so that our shared agreement would be approved. So I don't know if there's any questions, but essentially it's the same agreement we've always had.
Any board member with any comments or questions?
Is it true that we have no right to really use Tamlin Field? That St. Mary's has that?
The agreement is with Memorial Field. We have first dibs on all the fields in Memorial Field, yes. We don't need to use Tamlin Field, because we have all the fields at Memorial Field.
Eddie?
During referendum construction, are there extra ideas in place about use of fields and spaces for more of Memorial Field, or like you said, Tamlin Field?
When we have a planned, looking ahead, the gymnasiums, the new ones will be built at Pierpont and Union before the old ones are decommissioned. So there'll never be a loss of gym space for either the school programs or the recreation. The backfield will be a staging area for the high school work. That will be an inconvenience to, as it was last time, to the high school and to recreation and lacrosse and anybody else, YMCA, anybody else who puts in a permit for that field. To the extent that the extent of the field that's going to be utilized and the safety of using a portion of the field that's not being utilized, we can't determine that yet till we have the plans. Last time we were able to use a part of the field during the renovation, but we'd have to see what's going on there and how safe that is. So that will be something that the borough understands that it may create a little tight space for them. For us, it'll be more of an interference for physical education, marching band. Last time we worked it out with our football team in terms of sharing some time for marching band down the practice field, things like that. But in terms of this agreement, there are certain things that are understood that aren't codified in the agreement. Okay.
So if there's no other comments or questions from board members, Dr. Lottie, could you put those resolutions forward?
I put those resolutions forward for the board vote.
Is there a second? Mr. Rowland? No other comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Ahmed?
Yes.
Dr. Oladi?
Yes.
Mr. Healy?
Yes.
Mrs. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Lebrera?
Yes.
Dr. Racine?
Yes.
Mr. Rowland?
Yes.
Mr. Mazzone?
Yes.
Motion's carried. Thank you.
So moving on our agenda to old business. Is there any board member that has any old business they'd like to raise at this time? Mr. Curley, anything that you'd like to raise in the way of old business?
I sent you all the information about the Parent Academy, and we're also going to be adding a few more programs over at Washington School. There'll be an addendum coming out. We're going to push it, advertise it, and some of the stuff we've been doing for years. Some of it is new things that we're doing, and hopefully see how it goes this year, and then build on it going forward.
Yeah. So indulge me in a bit of history for now. I know to tell Jack this. So the referendum now going forward, it's good to mention that this is the 200th year since the first school was built in Rutherford. In 1819, in Balding Springs District number 40. It was down by where Nick's Towing is today. And it operated until 1870 when the Park School was built, which is now our town hall. So 200 years from the first school, we're now planning for the future.
That's good.
That's great.
Maybe I'll mention that to Jennifer Salisi. Maybe that's a story for this is rather.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
And there is a plaque down by those condos.
I know you found it.
Yeah, I found it on Pokemon Go, I'll admit.
I will direct her to you because this is your story.
I'll tell her.
I just wanted to make a comment. I wanted to compliment the Parent Academy concept, and I think it's a really fantastic beginning of hopefully a branding of the homeschool partnership. And I thought the topics all seemed really rich. Hopefully, we'll be able to promote those to get good attendance with text messaging and whatnot, and sort of track that and see how it goes. But I think it's got some real legs to build on for the future.
Yeah. We're working on a couple of different surveys to find out, how did people hear about it, the ones who showed up, and then another survey maybe midway through it to find out from people what they know about it and why they maybe haven't come or what they'd be interested in seeing and things like that. But yeah, I think it's a good concept. Has a lot. There's a lot of ideas that didn't make it to the first year, but there's more ideas than we had time to do. So we'll see how it goes in the future.
Can I just say one thing? It was a pleasure today to see Teresa Casadante, and it was a lot for her today to come and present it because it was Tom's birthday today.
Yeah.
So it was a little.
Yeah, and one of the things we spoke after, I keep saying the Casanate family, and she reminded me of these monies came in from all kinds of people, from across the community and from outside. And the other thing she reminded me of, and she's going to write something up for me, next year. As time goes on, it's amazing how time goes. And, people, teachers, hear the name, but they don't maybe have a connection with, a board member or, so, well, we see at the senior breakfast every year where scholarships of people that I remember as colleagues and to the kids who are getting the scholarships and the teachers in the room, it's just a name. So we're going to try to come up with a little more information next year when we talk about it so that people understand the importance of it.
I just wanted to give a shout out to Mr. Fogno, all the RHS band boosters. I was down at the Battle of the Bands, and I have to tell you what a mammoth undertaking it was to organize it. There were tractor trailers and buses. It was a major production down by Field.
Going to comment also on Wendy Armourcost, who did a wonderful job.
Absolutely.
But the last couple of bands that I saw, I was 137 students in the Ramsey band.
Mm-hmm.
They were just overwhelmingly, they're beautiful, they're just wonderful. I had no idea it was this grand. And Rutherford did great. We had our two baton twirlers and flag wavers in it, and a group tube, and they didn't compete last Saturday night, but they will in other ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was really wonderful.
Mammoth undertaking, huge logistics, so kudos to everybody
Yeah.
who
Good.
participated.
Thank you. I'll make sure they get that for you.
And just one more thing, I did attend the Bergen County dinner on October 3rd. The main speaker was Michael Jordan. He's a superintendent of Maywood Schools.
Maywood, yeah.
And he spoke about mindfulness.
Not that Michael Jordan. Not even close to that Michael Jordan.
He's also
Oh, I think it's Michael Jordan, basketball. Not the basketball.
And hopefully, Mike, if you're watching this, I don't really mean that.
Wow.
But in any case, he spoke about mindfulness, he spoke about special education. And the one thing that is going to be new that they're trying to do is unsung heroes. And you've heard this. This is they want high schools to come up with a student that really could use the recognition because he or she has done so much. And it's not necessarily a student who achieves. It could be one that has had difficulties, could be a special ed, but one that shows areas of greatness. And that is coming up. The next meeting, I'll just make this quick, is going to be on December 3rd at the Holiday Inn. The one after that, January 29th. The one on December 3rd is Wellness and Mental Health. The one on January 29th is Glen Rock High School School Law Roundtables. The third one is March 3rd, 2020, Unsung Heroes, Student Recognition. And the last of the year is a celebration where they award board members and so forth. But if you can make it, they're good. They're about every 2 months. They feed you. You're out by 9 o'clock usually. So, look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jones. If there's no other comments, I'd like to move on to legislative update. Mr. Rowland?
Yes, I have an intersection of sports and civil rights to talk about. The New Jersey wrestler from Buena High School last year was forced to cut his hair before a match. It was a high school match. And the referee made a decision that his hairstyle, not actually the length, was the issue. So it was determined just recently, 2 days after our last meeting, that this was a violation of his civil rights and against the New Jersey laws against discrimination. The referee was given a 2-season suspension after their 9-month investigation. So just an interesting thing to think about, that not allowing a referee or any official to just have free reign over how they decide to preside over an event, but follow the rules. It's unfortunate. There's a video that went viral about this incident. So we have some resolution.
Very good. Thank you for the update. The time is now 9:09 p.m. I'd like to open the meeting back up to the public for any comment. Not hearing or seeing or being rushed by anyone at 9:10. I will close the floor to the public. And I believe there's a need for executive
For one student issue, yep.
So with that, I'll need a motion to go into executive session. Motion. And second? Yes.
The for student issue, 5 minutes. Right. Okay.
Sorry, Sal.
Very
I can't resist.